G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 10th of July 2026. As the war continues, we have entered a new phase of intermediary attacks. Russia and Ukraine have both switched from short-range drones to tethered drones. The intense battle in Kharkiv was often fought using tethered drones on long fibre optics. And now they're switching to autonomous intermediate drones. These can have ranges sometimes in the hundreds of kilometres. And they are fired randomly from all over the battlefield, often from the back of a truck. Often, the Russians merely drive out of their base at high speed, fire the drone, and complete the loop. Now, some are launched from Crimea, others from Kursk. It seems to be a recurring pattern of rotating at random, musical chair. But the new intermediary drones, they're launched from specialty vehicles, but they're not, technically they're cruise missiles. They are intermediate range cruise missiles. Russia recently targeted the Samsung plant in Ukraine, initially only reported as infrastructure that did not belong to the Ukrainian military. Well, in fact, it belonged to the Ukrainian government and Samsung, and it was a military contractor. So just because it didn't belong to the military does not mean it's not a military target. Both sides are engaged in propaganda equally. Ukraine will only show you when a civilian building is hit. Rarely do they show you when a military building is hit. It's usually only a factory or from a distance with the top cut off so you can't tell what it is. Although 4 days ago they did post a petrol station in Sumny that was blown up, but after they cleared out the vehicles, the military convoy that had been there. Now the other propaganda they, of course, engage in is not showing you the military targets that are hit, and often deny it. Russia is a little bit more transparent, and it does show in oil facilities and occasionally a ship, but after they've fixed it. Often, though, the damage to ships is not that as bad. Most people thinking, big hole in the side of the ship, but they're not. There's only been one ship sunk by drones in the last year, I think. And it was a civilian trawler from Turkey that somehow got mistaken for a Russian destroyer. Allegedly. Because you never know what happens in war. Trying to trigger Article 5 has been the goal of Ukraine. They've openly called several times for Article 5 to be invoked after attacks they claim were by Russia on Poland, then Romania. All but one missile has been confirmed to have originated from Ukraine. All but one drone. Now that last drone that was Baltic, was at sea. And it was a surveillance drone along the Krasnov Gulf coast. And it was shot down by NATO. That's a provocation to war, but not a Russian attack. Now the missile that allegedly flew over NATO territory from the Baltic, no one knows where it went. No, but there were lots of drones fired by Ukraine over Belarus during the is it CIS exercises. The Russian security uh, treaty nations, which, as you noticed, there were Indian and Chinese observers, but no actual. But it was mostly Russian and Belarus, although there were some North Koreans. A lot of the CIS members have virtually, yeah, they don't travel for these exercises. They just rotate them every year. Russia's bearing the cost of its alliances, and it is showing. But it's like when you're isolated, you have no choice who your friends are. And that's on you, not on them. If you wanted to run isolated, you shouldn't have ever pushed Russia around. Remember, there's an old saying, and this is the problem when common sense isn't taught in schools. Beware who you step on your way up. Because they'll stand aside, because they won't catch you when you fall. So Russia's gone from aspirations to wanting to watch you fall. So the attrition phase is not over. The war is in fact stepping up attrition. But we're now going to see basically programmed missiles, and there are new missiles coming out over the next coming months. Now, what's happened with the Flamingo 10? Well, other than 10 deliveries to Poland, most of the Flamingos that go to Ukraine have been shot down. Ukraine's campaign, of course, is totally subsidized by Europe. So Russia has to wear down the European economy, not the Ukrainian economy. The Ukrainian economy has already collapsed. Their GDP, they won't report the true figures. They report. But there's no way Ukraine has the same GDP regardless of what happens. It's the same with China. Ukraine and China. Always those two coming up, isn't it? They are so alike in many ways. Now, as we look at the state of the war, you can see there is escalation. Now, you should not be surprised. It always escalates towards the weekend. You always have a midweek burst and then a weekend burst. Oh, I forgot to tell you. There's going to be videos out there claiming, and some already launched, by pro-Ukrainian channels that claim Russia's retreating. And I'll show you images of those trucks and say, unnamed US sources. We'll get to that. And ironically, both sources that I have tracked down. One is Al Jazeera, right? Reporting quite differently the same story. You get two different stories from one photograph. And I'll show you another photograph shortly. But first, the major combat, of course, is concentrated. Sumy, Kharkiv. Wouldn't say Kupiansk is major combat, nor Lyman. The major combat, of course, is north of Seversk, south of Seversk, and southern Donetsk. That's the majority of combat, is these two. These are all minor combat, despite what you may think. So, second would be Zaporozhye and Lyman. Those two would be close to each other. Then you got minor combat in the rest. But these are just to draw Ukrainian troops to force Ukrainian forces to spread out thinner. But Russia has made progress in some now are calling it the exclusion zone, but it's the it's a buffer zone. Okay, it's a demilitarization. They're building a new border, a demilitarized zone. But the Russian exclusion zone, basically, they're setting up gateways. By the way, Belgrade, somewhere up here in Sumy, they are going to try and mirror Trump's wall, and they're actually trying to get some sort of rampart up, and big clear no man's land. But Russia's not as organized as America. Things take longer to get done, and Putin's not happy because he thought he could transform Russia. But personally, I think he has, but just not enough. And I think had he transformed Russia as he wanted, yeah, then Europe would have been scared. But I think European influence peddlers, and I think this goes for a lot of countries, I think a lot of the influence peddlers, Soros, Klaus Schwab, they pay people in countries to go slow, to obstruct and obscure progress, to whisper in the ear of university professors saying, well, you could research this, you could research dark matter, but if you make a breakthrough too soon, you won't have anything to do for the rest of your life. So yeah, the corruption of the systemic corruption is what's holding Russia back. And you might say that's a good thing. But is it? We wouldn't have had a war if Russia was allowed to progress naturally and would have joined the EU along with Ukraine. But yes, security concerns about Russia's alliances, which they were willing to give up, sort of, in that they would help them, in turn, transition. So China would have been the one isolated. But the money men in Wall Street didn't want that. And you can look it up, how Wall Street sabotaged itself by aligning with China. That Wall Street has lost money because they were betting on a Chinese future. And you can't blame Trump because the collapse of the Chinese state happened not under Biden, not under Trump, but already happened under Obama. It's just their debt has never been called. No one can call in their debt. So the Chinese debt has grown to 300%, which was exasperated by the collapse of... See, China hasn't taken any GDP off the book. They just add. No matter what happens, they only add. So when Evergrande collapsed, they didn't subtract. But now, all their infrastructure projects, they're running out of things to do. They can't build any more high-speed rail lines. They can't build any more tunnels. And maintenance of all their projects is putting the country at a point where it needs 200% revenue. This is like New York making all these promises. Oh, we're going to, open up all the rail lines. Well, the reason why those rail lines are closed is because they don't make money. They don't carry enough passengers to make money, to afford the maintenance on all the tracks. So they run the bare minimum they can. It's the same with the buses. They run the minimum because if they run even a few more, the MTA goes from making a few billion a year to nothing because maintenance adds up very quickly. The MTA is probably one of the largest public transport systems in the world. And it's pretty much modelled the same way after Tokyo and other successful. They all copy each other. They all bounce ideas off each other. And once upon a time, you had New York, even at the height of the Cold War, New York, Paris, Moscow, Tokyo, London, all meeting regularly to discuss public transport. Now, you could have taken this model of cooperation and added a few more cities to it over the years, and Europe would be humming along. And they could have been doing this in Ukraine. Instead, they choose violence every time. Now, why do the Europeans choose violence? Because the revolutionary mindset of the left. See, in the Cold War, the mindset was very right wing. Disarm, but, trying to get the Russians to disarm, trying to get them to stand down, trying to get them to realize the West isn't going to invade them. And that took 20 years. And virtually had Reagan to literally stand in their face and say, if we were going to invade you, we would literally storm the walls and you could not stop us. And they took the Russian generals on a tour of the aircraft carriers. The Russian generals had no idea. The war planners had not been out of Moscow for 15 years. So they had no idea how many carriers America had, really, because they were relying on the information given to them. And because it was so censored and compartmentalized, and the generals weren't even allowed to talk to each other. So each only knew a fragment, and each were planning on that one fragment for engagement. Each all thinking that their little fragments added up to the whole, when it did not. And so, after the fall of the Cold War, Russia had to rebuild and realize that the American adversary was too far ahead of them. And their only posture was to be defense. And so that defensive posture and that defensive mindset, Putin wanted to elevate Russia out of the malaise, because he realized the Russian state was dying. But the Europeans wanted to die. They want them to suffer the punishment of leaving communism, because they thought it was all glorious. Yet, you never see them swimming to Russia, do you? You never see them going to Russia, but you always see Russians leaving. And so that's why Putin wanted to rebuild, so Russians would come back, because he realized the best had left. Now, yes, a lot of people think he should have confronted the oligarchs. But has the West ever confronted the oligarchs? Has the West ever put any oligarch in jail for influence peddling or systemic corruption? And I'm not talking about Elon Musk or anyone obvious that you may think, but there are three names that come to mind who have been proven to have broken the law. George Soros, funding wars and revolutions around the world. Bang, public enemy number one. Bill Gates, whether you think he's guilty of deliberately circulating bad vaccines, he is guilty of negligence. Several courts around the world have found him 11 times. Him and Pfizer, guilty of negligence. They've only been fined, though. They've never been jailed or stopped, and they always keep getting refunded, claiming that the greater good. No, the incompetent people should never be. Three strikes, you're out. That's what it should have been. And the third one is probably obvious, but you don't think of it, and that's Klaus Schwab, the man who, the Europeans' version of George Soros, a man who has funded the Ukraine war, has organised the Ukraine war, But see, this is the problem with the West, is it's not the left have one big motto. It's not fascism when we do it. That's the entire motto of the liberal establishment. It's not fascism when we do it. So they always fund the worst in humanity, because fanatics are so willing to do the dirty work. So they fund criminal organizations like cigarette smugglers in Ukraine to make drones, They fund militias in Ukraine to wage war on ethnic Russians. They fund the corrupt politicians to drag their heels, the police to be belligerent. And you only have to, and in societies where order is so structured and obedience is rewarded and dissent is crushed, yes, it's so easy to control society by controlling around 200-300 people, maybe 1,000. So you think US aid, 5 million to a country, you don't think that's not enough? That's not much. But that's a whole year. That's a year's worth of bribes to police in Thailand, allegedly, to look the other way when US troops are on leave, for instance, allegedly. So that you have these little zones, allegedly, like Phuket, where there are lots of prostitutes, allegedly. Or Ukraine, where there are lots of prostitutes of questionable age, whether they're 18 or 16, allegedly 15. Or Hassan Piker and, Hassan Piker, I don't know if this is true or not, did admit he went to a brothel in Germany. This may have been the same brothel that, allegedly, that Hollywood in general, some big names, have been to, allegedly. Now, I think the German scene has cleaned itself up, but you look up sex trafficking documentaries, and you'll find Germany, France, Ukraine always coming up. And you'll find Hollywood names all the time when you look up Hollywood scandals and sex trafficking. There is systemic corruption such that people have tuned out. The crusaders, for want of a better term, have overplayed their hand. Because they have so many problems on their hands, they turn things political. And see, the left are trying to deviate everything towards the politics and aim it all at one person. Because it's easy to blame one person. It's easy and so they're always trying to repeat the same lies over and over again. So everyone associates sex trafficking and all these other crimes with one person. So that when that one person goes down or whatever, it all magically goes away. But you're just being manipulated. That's propaganda. All these attacks. Everybody making personal attacks, if they can't prove it, they give them 24 hours to prove it. If not, they lose their social media. You'll soon see social media clean up. But no, the First Amendment, we got to have all these debates. No, that's not what the First Amendment was about. And you know it. The founders would have put most of these people before a firing squad. Though that was harsh. The founders knew there were people you could not save. That they never intended the First Amendment to be for liars, cowards, and they called slanderous people cowards because you can't face your enemies, so you slander them from. And the Ukraine war is a result of slander, by the way. Russia and Ukraine slandering each other is what led to this war. Russia is equally as guilty for the slander, but not for the attacks. Those belong to the militias, and those militias were funded by criminals like George Soros, Klomominsky in Ukraine, the World Economic Forum, led by Klaus Schwab, although allegedly it's no longer led by Klaus Schwab, but the head of Nestle. But for want of a better word, you look it up and there doesn't seem to be, everywhere you go, everyone talks about Klaus Schwab. So is he still in charge? Is he allegedly in jail? There is just so many allegations that I think it's propaganda, that they're trying to mislead you so that you associate all the ills of the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab and not Charles who is the treasurer of the World Economic Forum, allegedly, or any of the other alleged members of the World Economic Forum, of which Putin and Zelensky used to be both members. Zelensky is still a member. And isn't it amazing that, why is this actor? Well, he's Kolominsky's friend, and Kolominsky's a member of the WF. So the WF training future leaders. They are trying to get you programmed to accept that if someone's in the WF, that they are a future leader. It's all slogans and propaganda. And speaking of, Al Jazeera and some American outlets claim this photo. As you can see, this is a truck heading to the exclusion zone. There's border crossings in eastern Ukraine, right? But the reality is, and according to Al Jazeera and other outlets showing the photo from a different image, these trees here, this is a different area, but this is troop rotation. That's all it's showing. Now they're claiming Azov Corps destroyed. There was an attack on, I think, this troop convoy. I'm not saying there wasn't, but yeah, more Russian troops killed. Yeah, there was a convoy, but here's the total convoy. Yeah, that's the total convoy. As those were headed, are now in Ukraine. A lot more troops headed in than out, which means the Russians are increasing the size of their combat army. Now, I think they're file photos, and some of them are old. The file photos, that is, if you do a reverse image search. So we have no idea, because Western media is engaged in propaganda. So we have no idea how many new troops for now are in Ukraine. And how many didn't make it. Probably how many people per truck. So 3 trucks destroyed out of what? You saw a dozen. So, yeah. And yeah, it is not. Yeah, and so the claim that the Russians only last 20 minutes is a lie. But they want you to think you're winning, because when you're winning, you're going to go back to sleep. They want you to sleep now. They don't want you awake. They don't want you worried. They don't want you panicked. They don't want you to look at the world around you. They want you distracted. And they want you to think the economy's bad, that Trump's doing terrible things, and Trump Iran caused Trump's bluster unpresidential. Meanwhile, this is the guy who's killed 40,000 of his own citizens. Yeah. I think Trump needs to bomb the Speaker of the Iranian House and say, no, you're not a good faith actor. Give me the next. I think this is a good negotiation tactic by the US. You lied to me. Boom. Next. I mean, war is bullying. You can't turn around and call Trump a bully and then say, hey, what are you doing when you attack other countries to try and force them to expel America? That's not free will. That's bullying. It's the pot calling the kettle black. And Trump has decided, well, I'm going to wear that label. Boom. Next. And so I hope the Speaker of the Iranian House gets blown up. I hope the Iranian delegation to the UN are shitting their pants. Although some have defected. But the rest are shitting their pants. And I hope they are. And I hope 6 more Iranian officials get killed. Because it's the only way to deal with a murderous regime. Stop it. No? Okay, bang, you're dead. Next. There's no, I'll give them 3 strikes and you're out. Be kind. But you can't. Mercy to the guilty is punishment to the innocent. And you keep running around calling Putin a killer. Yet, what about Zelensky? What about what about Macron and Merkel? What about all the officials in Britain have turned a blind eye? Once you stop being subjective with who you apply morals to, the better the world starts to get. The world will start to heal as more people realise morals don't have politics. They are morals. They are universal. Or you're going to say it's like a constitution. Constitutional rights do not apply, right? You are a visitor. Even if you break in, right? Someone breaks in your home, doesn't make him, like a rat born in a barn, doesn't make him a racehorse. Now, this channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience. So please, support the channel today. Empire of Elves, that's one word, Empire of Elves at myshopify.com. But there's the main character of my book, Cade, although technically the Empire is the main character. Right, wasn't long ago that we talked about the Duran 4. The Duran 4, it was the first of a series of jet-powered, now they've undergone radical design changes, but they were jet-powered drones, and the Duran 5 has been unveiled and unleashed at the same time. Now, it may look familiar. Yes, it does. Because they're using a similar design, as the Flamingo. Down to the same turbojet launch booster. These are carried on the back of a launch vehicle. They're actually towed, I think, into position. The vehicle backs up and they are launched off a towing array. And you'll see this explosion. This was the explosion, I think, covered a couple of days ago. This is the plant that was... They used a copy of the Flamingo on the Flamingo plant in Velograd? Velograd? Sorry. Having a bad day reading, I guess. But yes, this is the explosion that had the head of the Ukrainian come out and say, this did not belong to the Ukrainian military. Ah, what a weasel word. Adding military. So, did it belong to the government? Did it belong to Ukraine? Well, it was a military contractor, which makes it a military target, and it's owned by Samsung in partnership with Firepoint. And Firepoint is allegedly owned by a conglomerate of Zelensky's friends, and the silent partner, of course, is Kolominsky, the financier, who loaned them all the money. Ah, it's a money lender. Of course, it's always the money lender, isn't it? Now, the Polish defense minister has gone full Stalin. If you don't support me, I'm going to question your mental health. That is what Stalin did. So, Poland was talking about your national interest is to hate Russia, and if you don't, you must be mentally ill. Why is hatred? Hatred is not a virtue. Tolerance is not a virtue. Envy is not a virtue. Nor is wrath. Nor is lying. Ukrainians' air defences have allegedly destroyed 114 out of 137. There's that magic number again, around 20. Yet again. Every time they notice, eventually they change their numbers, don't they? They change their calculations. It's either 90% or 20 or thereabouts. And they keep, every time you notice, when you say, oh, was there? Well, where were they? And, well, there weren't that many. And it keeps going on around in circles. All right, so why are they standing in front of air defences? Yeah. Would you? Hey, look, there's a drone. Brrr, there goes your head. There. Some were down aerial debris. Yeah. In other words, air defense missile goes up, it must come down. Now, Ukraine is making a song and dance on their main news service right now about a fire in Taranrog. Well, Russia said Ukraine, so they launched 376 drones to cause one oil fire. There's the BLTL with the twin 23, the twin Zoo 23s firing off its anti-drone ammunition. Air defences, took out hundreds. Drone fragments fell on the Yellow Private House and other areas. Lots of aftermath. A few fires in Taranrog, including the one of the oil processing plants. So, Russia's launched an appeal on to the Human Rights Council for the and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and they want the Stablovsk attack to be declared a terrorist attack, that it was not unintended, that it was a deliberate attack. Now, Andrei Serpilnik, the first deputy chairman of the People's Council, that is the Parliament of the Lugansk People's Republic, has said they want it. Yeah, they want to put the Ukrainians who carried out the drone attack on the night of May 22. 21 students were killed. The UN has inspected, but they have not responded to the appeals. They were disregarded by the Europe and the UN Human Rights Council. So, they carried out a combined multi-stage and deliberate strike on the academic buildings and the college dormitory. It's a teachers' college, vocational training. So, if you do not have morality, you cannot complain, or you have no right to put the Russians on war trials. They're all out there wanting to put Russia on trial for all these attacks on Ukraine, but not one of them. And this is why during World War II, a lot of people were let off for their crimes, because the Allies had done the same thing. You could look it up. They covered it up for so long that people don't care anymore. But yes, heck, Roosevelt knew one of his advisors was a Russian agent and never once excluded him from any security meeting. And that's how Russians knew about the nuclear bomb and knew about the Rosenbergs, were able to approach the Rosenbergs and get the nuclear bomb intact. Photographs, that is, photographs and working documents, all intact, all in full. Photocopies, everything. Everything handed to them. Research, notes, everything handed to them. Because Roosevelt's good friend. Yeah, the fascist dictator Roosevelt. Yeah, those elections were safe and secure, weren't they? So safe and secure they had to pass laws to make sure that no one could serve multiple terms again. But the Democrats thought they had a winning formula with grievance politics, but it's starting to wear off. Now, Russia no longer believes the West wants peace talks. I think I'm not sure if this is a stab at Trump and Europe or just Europe. But they've asked for signs of goodwill, and they believe those have been exhausted. Now you have Merkel and Hollande, who admitted the peace talks in Belarus were just to buy time to rebuild the military and economy of Ukraine. Yeah. Your tax dollars at work, folks. When asked directly, are we at war? And why is there escalation? The Czech Prime Minister has asked and remains sceptical about NATO's strategy of military support for Ukraine. It is not a financial contributor. They won last year's election, which was pretty much a referendum on Ukraine. If you want to support Ukraine, vote for the current party. If not, vote for the opposition, and the opposition won. The opposition didn't win on a pro-Russian platform. It won on an anti-Ukrainian platform, that Ukraine should not be admitted to the EU under conditions of war, that the government should not be supporting foreign wars, that the government's job is not to defend Ukraine, a country who used to have the boot on these people's neck. The Ukrainians, remember, were the willing boot of the Russian army in Eastern Europe. We're not at war, Ukraine's at war, Babis told reporters. When asked about NATO's increased spending would pressure Moscow to negotiate, time will tell. Yeah. Now, they have struggled to reach the 2% GDP level of military spending. A lot of NATO countries, including France, were struggling. But of course, France has a bigger military. But now they want to go to 5%. 5% is close to, but when it gets to something like 10%, it is definite that a country is going to go to war. Like Ukraine. Ukraine, when Zelensky went in, budgets went up. Social programs were first to be cut. The US called for de-escalation in Ukraine. No one's de-escalated. It's delusional to think that Russia will de-escalate if Ukraine is not going to stop attacking Russian oil facilities. No. But Russia, because it cannot take out its anger and frustration on the companies providing equipment, that it's unsuccessful in its attacks on trains, and it's clear they have been unsuccessful attack on trains. They've been able to damage a few, but rarely have they been able to hit entire shipments. So it's hard to hit a moving train with the explosives required. This ain't World War II where Germany is out of aircraft and air defenses have been decimated. No. Russia would have to, remember the cost, right? How many thousands, right? How many 100,000, sorry. Over 100,000 pilots. So many aircraft were shot down in World War II. You realise that? All these big POW camps full of pilots. Now, yeah, most of them from bombers. Yeah, countries can't afford that kind of attrition because that kind of attrition is unrecoverable. World War Two was and one were huge um, blunders by both sides. Neither could stand down from escalation. And NATO support has not saved Ukraine from Russian aggression. And it is aggression. There's no other word for it when you blow up someone's energy grid. But it's the only way Russia can take out its anger on Ukraine for its strikes on Russia. But Russia has been so careful to always frame it and always work their attacks to be retaliation. And every attack is followed up by, are you going to stop now? Are you going to stop now? And eventually, they hope Ukraine will. Because every time they've arranged a ceasefire, Ukraine has broken it. And then the West will say, well, Ukraine told us Russia broke it. How many times do you have to hear that same phrase over and over again before you say, what's the statistically likelihood of every time it being Russia? Every time. That there's not one Ukrainian? That Ukraine is just such an innocent babe in the woods? That's the problem. When you cannot apply morality, when you have to always apply politics, you're becoming the left. When you apply politics to everything, you become the left. Now, a few Anglo markings from British American companies may not mean they were behind the attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. That said, the drone company that made the Flamingo is partly owned by Samsung, the other by Firepoint. But if they bought parts from the UK, and those were, yes, such as this jet engine, which I think is why they're showing it, then yes. They had an indirect role. Yeah. The idea is not to end the war, but the disintegration of Russia. That's the goal. It's not the goal isn't end the war. It's to disintegrate Russia. If you haven't figured that out, but Zelensky's drone war did fail. But Zelensky's hoping that the odds would favour him. That no matter how many times he's a degenerate gambler. Degenerate gamblers do this. They go to the casino and they gamble. They think, I've lost 9 times. The 10th time. It's the 10th time, baby. I've got to win. I've got to win. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but if you look at Vegas odds and casino wins, they sit around 93% payout. That's a very thin margin. But you look at the number of gamblers and gambling, that's a very big margin, which it means there is less than 1% winners in that, and so that's a lot of losers. That's a lot of people losing 9 out of 10. And that's what a degenerate gambler is. They will place that 10th bet. They'll go in with 10. They'll go in with 10 notes, get 20 to 50 chips, spread it out over a few hours to get so that they can get to their free drinks at a buffet, and yeah, and they lose. And they lose 9, 8, maybe 10 out of 10. Because any game that the rules allow for a large number of winners is never played, or the rules are changed, like Baccarat or how they add extra cards to the decks for blackjack. So remember, they put 7 decks. They shuffle 7 big decks, and when they get to a certain amount of wins, they stop, which means they haven't gone through the all deck. So once they've cleared enough kings and queens, they stop, because the odds of winning are increasing, not decreasing. They want to go. They want to hope that, yeah. So it's the same in war. The odds are stacked against you. You're not going to win most wars. It may look like you win a lot of wars, but look at the collateral cost in manpower, in economic resources. And this is why Trump was consistently called for the killing to stop. Because these are irreplaceable resources. But the left are treating people like assets, and they don't care, and they cover up how many Ukrainians died. They do not care. And when they don't care about a Ukrainian, you think they're going to care about you? Do you think they're really compassionate, or it's all a performance? Exactly. Now, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. You can find my link in the description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. See you in the next video, and bye for now.